In a world where the superhero genre is on the decline, there are few shows and movies that are just about carrying the realm of heroes and villains with esteem. It's a show that's not only challenging the conventions of storytelling in superhero stories, but also providing unique and meaningful dialogue like never before.
Fuck you. I mean, just fuck you.
The strange thing is, it's a fairly simple show if you break down a lot of the elements of the story. The characters and their superpowers are nothing new that we haven't seen before. The villains have the same motivation as a Saturday morning cartoon. And although the violence is shocking and disturbing at times, it's been done many times in movies and comics. Where it really stands out is how it takes these familiar characters and themes, and changes it into something twisted, resulting in an emotional output that so many superhero stories lack in the media landscape. The main hook is of course hinted on Omni-Men. Superman if he was evil. He kills the Guardians of the Globe who are like the Avengers or the Justice League, and from that point we are invited into a landscape as chaotic as the multiverse, which also plays a big part. Invincible follows the son of Omni-Men, Mark Grayson, who gains his father's superpowers and becomes the titular character. Mark has to navigate the dual worlds of being both a hero and a high school teenager. All of these themes have been explored many times in past superhero narratives, and why Invincible doesn't feel stale is because it's taking a unique route in dissecting this trope. And these themes are relatable. It works in Spider-Man because a lot of people can empathize for a kid struggling to balance normalcy with fame and heroism. Someone who has to grow up from a boy to a man. Someone who has to take responsibility for his consequences. The same applies for Invincible, explored in a different way but still feeling refreshing. What made the first season of Invincible so successful was its ability to subvert the superhero genre. There are so many scenes that are difficult to watch, but they challenged you in a good way. The nature of violence is graphic but is not trying to deliberately put you off. It's presenting the consequences that heroes create for civilians. The Boys is a show that tackles this subject matter very well. In order for that to be believable, the show has to be violent and disturbing to make you understand that a world with superheroes may have its perks of magic and wonder, but also dread and destruction. There is a light-hearted tone to Invincible which creates great dynamics between characters and makes you attached to them, which means when a character dies there is an emotional weight adhered to the audience. What impressed me most about Invincible is how it manages to juggle so many subplots and stay consistent in quality. The main storyline drifts casually to a supporting character's arc. Most shows have a whole bunch of characters and subplots. It comes off as pretentious and meaningless, because it's trying to act smart with how they're slowly building each character's arc in each episode, but the character itself has no real purpose, they offer no energy to make themselves likable. It leaves the audience confused and unimpressed. Invincible is just pure chaos. Robert Kirkman is generating every possible idea, expanding the lore from infinite dimensions of Earth to the unknown universe, and pretty much works perfectly. The second season has been nothing short of story. There's about 20 different plots going on while the main narrative limps its way to the finish line in the most unorthodox fashion. Sometimes it can get heavy-handed. You think, why are they spending so much time on certain arcs when they don't even conclude by the end of the season and have been set up for the future? Like that strange plot with the archaeologist and the ancient spirit being awakened from his tomb. I did not understand what this has to do with the main narrative, but I trust the writers will make it work because that's what they've been doing in the last 2 seasons. They managed to maintain a consistent level of storytelling while cramming a whole bunch of new villains and heroes in the process. And you can tell that there's a lot of thought gone into the subplots. For example, the Lizard League have a short but strong impact on the characters. They have a long history with superheroes. Their motivations are fairly simple, they want to conquer the world, and they come off as very cartoonish. You're sometimes wondering, why are we spending so much time with these guys? They're not the main villain, they pose no real threat to Mark Grayson, but their arc does come into play in order to change a character. This was not something the writers and Kirkman made up on the spot. They had backstories about the lore of the Lizard League. They had a change of leadership, there was betrayal and revolutions. The details gone into small supporting characters shows how much care and detail there is for the world. However, as the story of Invincible progresses from season 1, there were bound to be more characters introduced and explored, to a point where you feel like too much is happening. They should focus on Mark's character and his dynamic with his father because that was the most interesting aspect of the show. Although there was a lot of things in season 2 I liked, there were some story angles that just felt unnecessary or were handled in a less engaging manner. The first season was a lot more straightforward in the story. Here it gets bloated, but don't get me wrong, I thought this season was great but just not as strong as the first. I love the expansion of Alan's character. He has grown to be my favourite character in the show. His arc gave us insight into the Coalition and how the other worlds have been affected by the Viltrumites. I even liked Debbie's arc. It was grounded and realistic and didn't feel too grim to the point where you felt bored. And because her arc is closely connected to Mark, it never felt like we were losing track of the main storyline. I thought Mark and Amber's relationship was handled quite smoothly. It didn't feel stale, although I wasn't really convinced about their chemistry and if they really did love each other, but it was a realistic approach about being a boyfriend to a superhero and how exhausting and frightening it can be. But then there are other story arcs that feel hit or miss. Some worked and others didn't, but I wasn't so weighed down by them. It's clear that they're not trying to conclude the characters' journeys for just one season. I think once the whole show is completed, a lot of the character arcs will feel more satisfactory, and now I suddenly envy the people who will be able to watch this show once it's finished without having to wait 3 years for the next season to air. But going back to the subplots and character arcs, Atom Eve's character was the most underwhelming. She was sidelined for the whole season. I get that she was no longer part of the Guardians and that she was going to be separated from the pack. They explore the consequences of her powers, the difficulties she faces at home with her adopted parents. It was all very dull, to be honest. Whenever the story cuts to her arc, the show's momentum loses steam. And what's frustrating is that she doesn't change at all by the end. The only engaging aspect was her feelings towards Mark. They should have focused entirely on her unrequited love for Mark and how this affected her day-to-day life as a hero. Duplicate was a character with a noticeable flaw from the start. If she can create multiple clones, her real self doesn't actually have to be present during the fight. And that's exactly what they reveal at the end of season 2 when she is presumed dead. They never explain the logistics of how far away she needs to be from her clones or if she needs to maintain her health and physique in order for the clones to be capable for combat. Nonetheless, it didn't really come as a shock when we see she did not die. I thought the recurring subplot between Rudy Connors and Amanda was decent. In the last season, Rudy uses Rexplode's DNA with the help of the Mauler twins' expertise in cloning to make a new teenage body, so he can live the life he never could and also have a better chance at forming a relationship with Amanda. The reason it worked is because it was charming and one of the few times in the show where you knew nothing absurdly violent and distressing was going to occur. There was good back and forth dynamic between the two. Rudy is still struggling with understanding how to communicate and understand people, while Amanda is very self-conscious and hostile about her curse as Monster Girl. They both come to terms with their problems and form a stronger relationship by the end of the season. It was short progress but still showed change in their characters. The storyline with Donald was really confusing at first and I didn't know if this was entirely necessary for the plot. It was kind of tying loose ends from the first season. It felt like a completely different story, like a prelude to Blade Runner. But it does come full circle and provides a really emotional scene when Donald stops Cecil from ending his life after overcoming his own trauma. Rex had a surprising storyline because of the drastic change he went through this season. It had to take a bullet to the head to stop him from being an annoying arsehole in every episode. I would have expected him to be more traumatized by the end, but it was still a strong arc in the series. The storyline with the Martians and the Sequids were fairly entertaining for the most part. It introduced a new and amusing character to the Guardians and allowed them to develop as a team, and mend relationships from negative to positive. But it was really annoying when it's revealed that there was still one more Sequid on Earth, and I really don't think we need to see any more of these creatures. I hope they kill them off as fast as possible in the next season. Alright, one thing that did kind of bother me was how they handled what I believe is the main villain of the season. Since Omni-Man had fled, there was room for a new and complex villain called Angstrom Levy, a man who can create portals to other dimensions. He brings the multiverse story to Invincible by gathering several alternate universe variants of himself to improve his new world. He is a lot like Kang from the Marvel Universe, except the actor playing him hasn't been convicted of sexual assault. What I find frustrating about this villain was how he was set up as the big bad from the first episode of Season 2. He's not even a villain, which was great to see. It made things very complicated for Mark from an ethical perspective, but then his presence just vanishes and doesn't really come back until the penultimate episode. There was a lack of uncertainty about where this season was heading. With all the various plots being thrown together, you felt as though Angstrom's arc was being thrown under the bus. He had all the right ingredients to make a worthy villain. However, his presence was short-lived, and it seemed like his character was being used as a device to change Mark forever. Being a man who can jump from one dimension to the other with the flick of his hand, you would expect the season to be focused on Angstrom, Mark, and the vast landscape of the multiverse. There is so much that can be explored. All his variants are killed in an accident and he turns from a man of peace to a man of vengeance. The mental pain that Angstrom would be going through is scarcely explored until the final episode. They wanted to hold back on the multiverse theory because you can do so much with it and that will make things a lot more complicated. So maybe they held back for that reason. And it is starting to be a rather tired trope since we've seen it being hammered to death by Marvel. By the end of the season, it felt like Angstrom was only there to be the ultimatum for Mark's code of taking lives. Mark is trying to be a better version of Omni-Man. He does not want to be a killer even though he has the ability to be ruthless. Angstrom drove him to the breaking point, tormenting and threatening Mark's family. Once Mark had taken Angstrom's life, he has difficulty coming to terms with this, and he will be forever scarred by this incident. It was a challenge for Mark to grapple with, but it shouldn't have been in the final episode. I think this should have occurred halfway through when there were so many other storylines being thrown in the mixer. The most fascinating story was when they focused on Omni-Man, his past with the Viltrumites, and the Coalition. Nolan became the most multifaceted character in the show. He had committed the most evil crimes, shown no sign of empathy, and always viewed himself as superior to supposed lesser beings. That one moment in season 1 when he holds back from killing his son was the first sign of change, and he genuinely felt remorse for all the blood he spilt. It was an extremely fascinating watch seeing him tormented by his own actions, questioning his own sanity, his own morality. This enhanced the already chaotic relationship between himself, his wife, and Mark. The addition of Mark having a new brother was a great metaphor of hope and humanity in Nolan's character. And when you add his mental psychosis merged with the Viltrumite and the Coalition, the story just got a lot more captivating. The Viltrumites are the ultimate villains of Invincible. They are genuinely frightening, and it was best shown through Anissa, a terrifying Viltrumite who showed just an inch of what she is capable of. She created genuine terror when she placed her hand on Amber's neck. The fight between Mark and Anissa was so engrossing, but it also made you feel at ease, like the calm before the storm. You weren't sure if she would fly off or just kill everyone on that boat because she simply can. And that's what makes the Viltrumites such great villains. They think that what they're doing is for the good of the people. They're saving lives. But really they're showing their superiority in a domineering way that is effectively the worst dictatorship that you can think to imagine. So Invincible Season 2 is complete chaos, but the best kind of chaos. Sure, some parts feel a bit overwhelming and unnecessary. Some scenes are a lot less intriguing than others, as well as character arcs. But in truth, if you want to see a good superhero story that challenges the conventions of the genre, look no further than Invincible.